I'm 23 years old, and this happened to me last October when I was house-sitting for my parents in their suburban neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. They'd gone to visit my sister in Florida for 2 weeks, and I offered to stay at their place to water the plants and keep an eye on things. Looking back, I should have just let the plants die. Their house sits at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by these massive oak trees that make everything feel isolated, especially at night. The nearest neighbor is probably 100 yards away, and with all the trees, you can barely see their lights. It's the kind of place where you never lock your doors during the day, where everyone knows everyone, and nothing bad ever happens. That's what made what happened so much worse. It was a Tuesday night, around 2 a.m. I was binge-watching some Netflix series in the living room, half asleep on the couch, when I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. Not aggressive pounding, not frantic knocking like someone was in trouble. Just 3 measured knocks, like someone was being polite. I muted the TV and listened. Silence. I figured maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe it was a branch hitting the door in the wind, but there wasn't any wind that night. The air was completely still, that weird kind of October silence that makes every small sound seem amplified. Then, it came again. 3 more knocks, exactly the same rhythm and volume as before. This time I was sure I'd heard it. I looked at my phone, 2:07 a.m. Who knocks on doors at 2 in the morning? My first thought was that maybe something had happened to one of the neighbors, some kind of emergency. But wouldn't they be more urgent? Wouldn't they be calling out or pounding on the door? I walked to the front window and carefully pulled back the curtain, just a tiny bit. The porch light was on, casting this yellow circle of light on the front steps, but I couldn't see anyone. The street was empty, no cars, no movement, just that eerie suburban stillness. I decided to ignore it. Maybe it was kids playing pranks, though that seemed unlikely on a Tuesday night. I went back to the couch and turned the TV volume up a little, trying to focus on the show, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching the house. About 10 minutes later, I heard the knocking again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the back of the house. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the sliding glass door that leads to the backyard. My blood went cold. Someone had walked around the house. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the kitchen, staying low and keeping the lights off. The backyard was darker than the front, with just a small motion sensor light that apparently hadn't been triggered. I could barely make out the shape of the patio furniture and my dad's grill. But as I watched, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a figure standing at the edge of the light, just barely visible in the shadows, near the fence. It was definitely a person, tall, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie, and they were completely still, just standing there, staring at the house, not moving, not trying to hide, just watching. I ducked down below the windowsill, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might wake the neighbors. I stayed there for what felt like forever, just listening. The knocking didn't come again, but somehow that was worse. At least when they were knocking, I knew where they were. After about 20 minutes, I finally got up the courage to look again. The figure was gone. The backyard looked empty, peaceful even, but I knew what I'd seen. I spent the rest of the night on the couch with all the lights on, my dad's old baseball bat next to me, and 911 already dialed on my phone, with my thumb hovering over the call button. Every small sound, the house settling, the refrigerator humming, a car driving by on the main road, made me jump. Around 4 a.m., I heard something that made me freeze completely. The sound of footsteps on gravel, slow and deliberate, coming from the side of the house. Then I heard what sounded like someone testing the windows. Not trying to break them, just gently pushing on the frames, checking to see if any of them were unlocked. The footsteps moved from window to window, all along the side of the house. I could track their progress by the soft sounds. A gentle push here, a slight rattle there. Someone was methodically checking every possible entry point. Then the footsteps stopped. The house went completely silent again. That terrible kind of quiet that makes you strain to hear anything, any sign of where they went. I waited, barely breathing, for what felt like an hour. Just as I was starting to think they'd given up and left, I heard the worst sound of all. The slow, quiet squeak of the back door handle being turned. Someone was trying to get in. I'd locked that door before going to bed. I was sure of it. But the handle kept turning slowly, like someone was being very careful not to make noise. Then I heard a soft, clicking sound, and I realized with absolute horror that the door was opening. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted up the stairs to my parents' bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I called 911, whispering into the phone that someone was in the house. The dispatcher kept me on the line, and I could hear her radioing for police units. For the next 15 minutes, I sat on my parents' bed, listening to the sounds coming from downstairs. Footsteps moving slowly through the house, the creak of floorboards, cabinet doors being opened and closed. Someone was searching the house, and they were taking their time. The police arrived with sirens and lights, and everything went quiet downstairs. When they searched the house, they found the back door standing wide open. Whoever had been inside was gone. But on the kitchen counter, they found something that still gives me chills. My parents keep a small notebook by the phone for messages and grocery lists. Someone had written in it, in careful block letters, "You have a nice home. I'll be back." The police dusted for fingerprints but never found anything useful. They increased patrols in the neighborhood for a few weeks, but nothing else happened. My parents came home early from their trip, and I never house sat for anyone again. What still haunts me isn't just that someone broke into the house. It's how methodical they were, how patient. They spent hours testing every entry point, watching, waiting. And that note, it wasn't a threat exactly. It was more like a promise, like they weren't done with the house, or maybe with me. I drive by that neighborhood sometimes, and the house looks the same as always. Peaceful, safe, normal. But I know better now. I know that someone out there knows exactly which windows don't lock properly, which door handle turns the easiest, and how long it takes for the police to respond to a call from that address. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if they kept their promise. This happened to my friend Hazel about 3 years ago in Riverside County, California. She lived in one of those typical Southern California suburban developments, rows of identical houses with small yards and attached garages. Her husband Luke worked the night shift at a manufacturing plant, leaving Hazel alone with their 2 young kids, Kelly and Royd, who were 6 and 8 at the time. Hazel had always been comfortable being alone at night. The neighborhood was quiet and family-friendly, the kind of place where kids rode their bikes in the street and neighbors borrowed tools from each other. Their house was in the middle of the block, with neighbors on both sides and streetlights that kept everything well lit. She never worried about security, especially with Luke, just a phone call away. But that Tuesday night in March changed everything. Luke had left for work around 10 p.m., same as always, kissing Hazel goodbye and reminding her to lock up. The kids were already asleep, exhausted from soccer practice and homework. Hazel settled in to watch some TV and catch up on laundry, planning to be in bed by midnight. Around 11:30, she was folding clothes in the living room when she heard a sound from the garage. It was a metallic clanging, like someone had knocked over a paint can or bumped into Luke's tool rack. Their garage was cluttered with the usual suburban stuff: bikes, Christmas decorations, garden tools, boxes of old clothes. Something was always falling over or shifting around. Hazel paused for a moment, listening, but the sound didn't repeat. She figured the wind had blown something over. Their garage door was old and didn't seal perfectly, so sometimes when the Santa Ana winds picked up, they'd rattle things around inside. She went back to folding laundry, but about 10 minutes later she heard it again. This time, it was a series of metallic sounds, like someone was moving things around deliberately. She muted the TV and listened more carefully. The sounds continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. Now she was concerned. The wind hadn't picked up outside. She could see through the living room windows that the trees weren't moving at all, and the sounds had a rhythm to them. Not random like things falling over. More like someone was searching through their stuff. Hazel grabbed her phone and texted Luke. "Hearing weird noises in garage. Probably nothing but wanted you to know." He texted back immediately. "Want me to come home? I can leave early." She almost said yes, but then felt silly. What was she going to tell him? That she heard some clanging sounds. He'd lose money leaving work early, and it was probably just a raccoon or possum that had gotten inside somehow. "No, I'm sure it's fine," she texted back. "Just wanted to let you know in case." The sounds stopped for about 20 minutes, and Hazel started to relax. She finished the laundry and was getting ready to head upstairs to bed when she heard something that made her blood run cold. The door from the garage into the house was slowly creaking open. That door was always locked. Always. It was one of Luke's rules. He was paranoid about someone breaking into the garage and then having easy access to the house. Hazel stared at the door from across the living room, watching it swing open inch by inch, revealing the darkness of the garage beyond. She grabbed her phone and started dialing 911, but before she could hit call, she heard heavy footsteps in the garage, moving slowly but deliberately toward the open door. Someone was coming into her house. Hazel ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife she could find from the block on the counter. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She thought about running upstairs to get the kids, but what if the intruder heard her? What if they followed her up there and trapped all three of them? Instead, she crept to the bottom of the staircase and listened. She could hear the footsteps more clearly now. Slow, careful steps, moving through the garage and into the house. Whoever it was, they were trying to be quiet. But the old hardwood floors creaked with every step. Hazel pressed herself against the wall at the bottom of the stairs, knife raised, and called 911. She whispered as quietly as she could, "Someone is in my house. They came through the garage. I have 2 kids upstairs sleeping." The dispatcher kept her on the line, asking for her address and details, but Hazel could barely focus on the questions. She could hear the intruder moving through the ground floor, opening and closing doors, like they were searching for something or someone. "I need you to stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "Officers are en route. ETA 4 minutes. Where are you in the house?" "At the bottom of the stairs," Hazel whispered. "I can hear them moving around down here." "Are your children safe?" "They're upstairs sleeping. I don't think they know what's happening." The footsteps were getting closer to the living room. Hazel realized that if the intruder came around the corner, they'd see her crouched at the bottom of the stairs. She had to make a choice: run upstairs to the kids or hide and hope the police arrived in time. She chose the kids. Hazel ran up the stairs as quietly as she could, still clutching the knife and the phone. She slipped into Kelly's room first, gently shaking her daughter awake. "Kelly, sweetheart, we need to play a quiet game," she whispered. "We're going to hide in Mommy and Daddy's room and be very, very quiet." Kelly, still half asleep, nodded without asking questions. Hazel gathered her up and carried her to Royd's room, where she woke her son the same way. Both kids seemed to sense something was wrong, but they stayed calm and quiet. Hazel got both children into the master bedroom and locked the door. She positioned them in the walk-in closet behind a row of Luke's work clothes and told them to stay there no matter what they heard. Then she stood by the bedroom door with the knife, listening to what was happening downstairs. The footsteps had gotten heavier, less careful. She could hear cabinet doors opening and closing in the kitchen. Then the sound of someone going through drawers. They were definitely searching for something. Money, jewelry, electronics. She didn't know. "Police are on scene," the dispatcher said through the phone. "Stay where you are." Hazel heard car doors slamming outside, then voices calling, "Police!" But instead of relief, she heard something that made her heart stop. Heavy footsteps running up the stairs. The intruder was coming up to the second floor, and the police were still getting in position outside. Hazel pressed herself against the bedroom door, knife raised, as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. She could hear the person moving from room to room. First the guest bedroom, then the kids' bathroom, then Royd's room. Each door opened and closed quickly, like they were looking for something specific. Finally, the footsteps stopped outside the master bedroom. Hazel held her breath, clutching the knife so tightly her knuckles were white. The door handle slowly turned, but the lock held. Then someone pounded on the door, hard and aggressive, not knocking like they wanted to be let in, but pounding like they were trying to break it down. The whole door shook with each impact. "Police! Open the door!" came a voice from downstairs. The pounding on the bedroom door stopped immediately. Hazel heard running footsteps in the hallway, then the sound of a window opening, probably in the guest bedroom that faced the backyard. A few seconds later, she heard shouting from outside, and what sounded like someone crashing through bushes. Then more shouting, and finally, silence. When the police finally cleared the house and came upstairs, they found Hazel still standing by the bedroom door with the knife, and the kids still hidden in the closet. The intruder had escaped through the guest bedroom window, but they'd left behind something disturbing. In Royd's room, they'd opened every drawer and looked under the bed, but they hadn't taken anything or made a mess. It was like they were looking for something specific, or maybe someone specific. The police found fresh footprints in the backyard and some torn fabric on the window frame, but the intruder had gotten away in the darkness. What really bothered Hazel, though, was what the police found in the garage. The intruder had been inside for at least an hour before coming into the house, maybe longer. They'd gone through boxes, moved tools around, and had even set up what looked like a makeshift workspace on Luke's tool bench. And on that workbench, they found a notebook with the layout of the house sketched inside, including which rooms were bedrooms and which windows faced the backyard. The intruder had been planning this for a while. They knew the family's routine, knew when Luke would be at work, and knew exactly how to get inside. The random metallic sounds Hazel had heard weren't random at all. Someone had been systematically going through their day, preparing to come inside. The police increased patrols in the neighborhood, and Luke took time off work to install a security system and reinforce all the locks. But Hazel never felt safe in that house again. Every small sound at night made her jump, and she couldn't stop thinking about those footsteps running up the stairs, coming straight for the bedroom where she and her children were hiding. They moved to a different neighborhood 6 months later, but Hazel still checks every lock twice before bed, and she still sleeps with her phone in her hand. because she knows that somewhere out there, someone spent time in their garage, drew a map of their house, and had plans for her family that the police arriving interrupted. And sometimes she wonders what would have happened if the police had been just a few minutes later. I was a junior at a small college in upstate New York, renting this old 2-story house with 3 other guys about 10 minutes from campus. The place was typical college housing: cheap rent, outdated everything, and a landlord who fixed problems only when absolutely necessary. But it was ours, and we'd been living there for almost 2 years, without any major issues. The house had this unfinished basement that we mostly used for storage and laundry. None of us spent much time down there. It was concrete floors, exposed beams, and just generally creepy, in that way old basements are. There was one small window that faced the backyard, always covered with grime, and a separate entrance from outside that we never used. The landlord had given us keys to it, but we kept it locked and pretty much forgot about it. My roommates were Galrin, Ronald, and Otis. We all had different schedules, so it wasn't unusual for the house to be empty during the day or for just 1 or 2 of us to be there at night. We were typical college guys. We didn't worry much about security, usually left doors unlocked, and figured our biggest threat was maybe someone stealing beer from the fridge. The weird stuff started in early November, about 6 weeks into the fall semester. I'd be upstairs in my room studying late at night and hear these sounds coming from below. Not from the first floor where my roommates might be watching TV or moving around, but from deeper in the house, from the basement. At first I thought it was just the old house settling, or maybe pipes making noise. The sounds were subtle, soft footsteps, something being moved around, the occasional creak of floorboards. But they always happened late at night, usually between midnight and 3 a.m., and they had a pattern to them that didn't seem random. I mentioned it to my roommates, but they brushed it off. Galrin said old houses make all kinds of noises, and Ronald joked that maybe we had a ghost. Otis said he'd heard some sounds too, but figured it was just mice or something. None of them seemed concerned, so I tried to ignore it. But the sounds got more frequent and more distinct. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like someone walking around down there, slow and deliberate steps across the concrete floor. Other times it sounded like things being moved, boxes sliding, metal objects clinking together, like someone was rearranging furniture. One night in mid-November, I was coming home late from the library around 11 p.m. The house was dark. Everyone else was either out or already asleep. I was making a sandwich in the kitchen when I heard something that made me freeze. It was coming from the basement, but it was louder than the usual sounds. It sounded like someone was doing laundry. I could hear the washing machine running, which was weird because I knew none of my roommates had started a load before they left or went to bed. I opened the basement door and called down, "Hey, someone doing laundry?" No answer, but I could definitely hear the washing machine running, and I could see a dim light coming from the laundry area. I went downstairs to check, figuring maybe Otis had started a load and forgotten about it. But when I got to the bottom of the stairs, the washing machine was silent and dark. The whole basement was dark, no lights on anywhere, no sound except the hum of the old furnace. But here's the thing that really freaked me out. The air smelled different. Not musty and stale like it usually did, but like someone had been down there recently. Like body odor and food. Faint, but definitely there. I looked around quickly, didn't see anything obviously wrong, and got out of there fast. I convinced myself I'd imagined the sounds from upstairs, maybe heard the neighbor's laundry through the walls or something. The sounds continued for another couple of weeks, but I tried to ignore them. Finals were coming up. I had papers due, and I didn't have time to worry about mysterious basement noises. My roommates still thought I was being paranoid, and I started to wonder if they were right. Then, Galrin made a discovery that changed everything. It was the first Saturday in December, and we were all home for once, just hanging out and watching football. Galrin went downstairs to switch his laundry from the washer to the dryer. He was down there for maybe 10 minutes, longer than it should have taken, and when he came back upstairs, his face was white. "Guys," he said, "you need to come see this." We all went down to the basement, and Galrin led us to the far corner, behind the furnace, where we never went, because there was no reason to. Behind a stack of old boxes that had been there since we moved in, Galrin had found something that made my blood run cold. Someone had set up a living space. There was a sleeping bag laid out on a piece of cardboard with a pillow and what looked like a few changes of clothes folded neatly beside it. Next to that was a small pile of food, crackers, canned goods, energy bars, the kind of stuff you could eat without cooking. And there was a flashlight, some batteries, and a notebook. "This wasn't here last month when I came down here to fix the dryer," Galrin said. "Someone's been living in our basement." We all just stood there staring at this makeshift campsite in our basement. It was neat and organized, like whoever was staying there was trying to be respectful about it. But it was also terrifying because it meant someone had been coming into our house regularly, staying overnight, and we had never known. Ronald picked up the notebook and opened it. Inside were pages of what looked like schedules and observations, times when each of us left for class, when we came home, when lights went on and off in different parts of the house. Whoever was staying down there had been watching us, learning our routines. "We need to call the police," Otis said. But Galrin shook his head. "And tell them what? Someone's camping in our basement? They'll ask if anything was stolen, if we were threatened, if we actually saw anyone. We have no proof this person is dangerous." We stood there arguing about what to do for maybe 20 minutes. Part of me wanted to just pack up the stuff and leave it outside, like maybe whoever it was would get the hint and leave. But another part of me was freaked out by how long this had been going on without us knowing. Finally, we decided to remove everything and then keep watch to see if someone came back. We gathered up the sleeping bag, clothes, food, everything, and put it all in garbage bags. Ronald wanted to throw it all away, but I convinced them to just put it in the garage for now, in case we needed to show it to police later. That night, none of us slept well. We kept the basement door locked and took turns checking it every few hours. But nothing happened. No sounds, no disturbances. We started to think maybe we'd scared off whoever it was just by discovering their hiding spot. We were wrong. 2 nights later, we were all in the living room around 10 p.m., playing video games and arguing about whose turn it was to buy groceries. The house was warm and bright, and we were starting to feel normal again, like maybe the basement thing had been resolved. Then we heard it. The basement door, which we'd kept locked for 2 days, slowly creaked open. All 4 of us froze, controllers in our hands, staring at each other. The basement door was maybe 15 feet from the living room, and we could see it standing open, revealing the darkness beyond. "Did anyone go down there today?" Galrin whispered. We all shook our heads. Then we heard footsteps coming up from the basement. Slow, careful steps on the wooden stairs, like someone was trying not to make noise, but couldn't help the old wood creaking under their weight. Otis grabbed his phone and started dialing 911. while the rest of us just sat there, paralyzed. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, and we could hear someone moving around in the hallway between the basement and the living room. "There's someone in our house," Otis whispered into the phone. "They came up from the basement." We're all in the living room. The movement in the hallway stopped, like whoever was there had heard him talking. For maybe 30 seconds, the house was completely silent. Then we heard the sound of the front door opening and closing, very quietly. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, they found the front door unlocked and the basement door standing open. They searched the whole house and basement but didn't find anyone. The sleeping bag and supplies we'd removed were gone from the garage. But in the basement, in the same corner where we'd found the campsite, there was a new note written in pencil on the concrete wall. "Thanks for the hospitality. Sorry to leave so soon." The police took a report and said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. But there wasn't much else they could do. No crime had technically been committed. Nothing was stolen. No one was hurt. And trespassing is hard to prove when you don't catch someone in the act. We had new locks installed on every door, including the basement entrance from outside, which we discovered had been jimmied open weeks earlier. We also found out from neighbors that they'd occasionally seen someone walking around the backyard late at night, but they'd assumed it was one of us. The thing that still bothers me the most is that notebook with our schedules. Someone had been watching us for weeks, maybe months, learning when we were home and when we were vulnerable. They knew which rooms we slept in, what time we usually went to bed, when we had late classes. And they'd been living 15 feet below us the entire time, listening to our conversations, our music, our phone calls. They knew everything about us, and we'd never known they existed. I transferred to a different school the next semester, and as far as I know, my roommates moved out when the lease ended. But sometimes I wonder if that person found another basement in another college town, with another group of students who leave their doors unlocked and never think to check the dark corners of their house. Because the scariest part wasn't that someone broke into our house, it's that they made themselves at home there, and we invited them to stay without even knowing it.